Okay.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining today. We're going to be talking about the Prepare program at SBP. Tess and I wanted to briefly introduce ourselves to all of you and thank you to those of you that just gave introductions of yourselves. My name is Helen Wiley. I'm the Disaster Preparedness Program Director at SBP. I started almost exactly 1 year ago at the organization. My background has been in research and policy. So I came from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, where I was Assistant Director of Research and Policy at a center that specialized in disaster finance and looking at insurance issues. I've worked in a bunch of different contexts, both domestically and internationally, on disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation issues. But it's really been a privilege to be at SBP for this past year and work through ways to really build out what preparedness looks like at SBP and how we interact with our stakeholders. And I'll turn it over to Tessa to introduce herself.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tessa Barron, and I am SBP's Prepare Program Associate. I've been here for, well, it was right around the start of the new year, so just about 7 months, a little bit less. So time is certainly flying. But before working at SBP, I worked for South Carolina's Office of Resilience, and I did a lot of work with different types of stormwater studies and different stormwater projects and that sort of thing. But I definitely wanted to, get more involved and shift gears from overseeing projects and watching folks do the work to being the one that got to go into communities and talk to different people and that type of thing. So yeah, really happy to be here.
Thanks, Tessa. And I just wanted to say for everyone on or people that watch this later that increasing facilitation across different programs and folks meeting one another is so important. And, Tess and I have our individual backgrounds, just as you guys do, in different things you've done, whether at SBP or elsewhere, but really encourage you to reach out to us if you're interested in learning more about kind of things we've done or not, as you might think about different roles for yourselves, both at SBP, but also continued career development. I just believe it's really important, in this disaster space and the larger climate space to be able to have those types of conversations between colleagues. So please always feel free to reach out. But with that, we're going to talk a little bit about what SBP's preparedness strategy is, give some different examples of what trainings and engagements have looked like this year at SBP and the Prepare program, and then a little bit about some different initiatives that we're working on. And all of this is, of course, very interconnected. There's other things we're working on as well, but hope this gives you some insights into the program. And we'll try to save time at the end for questions, but also please feel free to put questions in the chat throughout or even unmute yourselves. It's a small group here, but we of course want this to be interactive since you guys are giving up your time to listen to us. So, we've all seen SBP's 5-year plan, and I just wanted to highlight really quickly that when you look at the 5-year plan for Prepare, it is to reach 30 million homeowners, or roughly 5 million people annually in target regions across the US, with the goal of increasing flood insurance uptake by 10%. Now, as we'll get into a bit, as you might know, is disaster insurance is becoming really expensive, and we're actually losing policies across the country because it's so hard for folks to afford the insurance despite seeing more and more disasters in their area. So this is a very lofty goal that SBP has, but it helps inform a number of our different activities that we're doing in the Prepare program. And then when you look specifically at this year, the 3 scorecard goals that we have that are most emphasized in the Prepare program are: 1, implementing preparedness training and campaigns in 12 communities across the US, educating 12 million people in high-risk, under-resourced areas, and then launching our collective impact model in Georgetown, Kentucky. That is currently stalled, so I'm not going to share much about it today, but we'll be focusing really on those first 2 buckets in particular. So, before Tess and I came to SBP, the Prepare program's only focused on households and small businesses. But what's really important in how we're thinking about preparedness today is that while those are two of our main training targets in this program, the program is really working across all the different stakeholders that need to have greater knowledge and capacity in order to make more informed disaster preparedness decisions. It really is key that we're engaging all different types of stakeholders in educational and training opportunities, because working towards future disaster preparedness is such a hard thing to do. And it really involves having community leaders and the stakeholders that work in turn with our most vulnerable households be better equipped with information they need to then in turn share that with their community members. So, our first major goal this year is educating 12 million people across the country. And there's a bunch of different ways in which we try to do that at SBP. So I'll talk a lot about different types of trainings we do, but one of our largest ways of reaching folks is through technology and digital mediums. And so the comms team is such a tremendous partner of the Prepare program and how they work to put together our digital campaigns and leverage, all the different social media sites and what verbiage, et cetera, plays well to get different preparedness materials in front of folks. So we, for instance, this year are doing preparedness tips of the month, which you might have seen on SBP's different social platforms. And then there's very tailored posts that, particularly starting in May with kind of preparedness season getting underway, that the comms team has really been putting out a lot of really great posts throughout each month. In particular, SBP has a lot of really great resources that go through different preparedness actions. And so if any of you have been here longer, you might have been aware of SBP Protects, which was a separate website that SBP used to use to house both preparedness and recovery resources. I just want to signal to everyone, while that site is still live, it is going to be going away completely once SBP's new website is completed. And in the interim period, we have a web page on our current website where all of the preparedness resources have been moved. And so if you ever want to guide or find people, guide people to where our resources are, you should go to sbpusa.org and then /prepare natural disaster. And that's where you'll find our different resources. They're currently all housed on one page, but the idea will be, once we're on the new website, that you'll be able to sort by disaster type in order to have much more tailored information. Several new resources that are good to highlight is, one, we have a great video on 5 quick things to prepare for a natural disaster. Kenneth Morgan from our SBP office in New Orleans, he's featured in it, but that's a really great one, and it's a good resource for sharing with households because it's about tips and actions that are more accessible that folks can take. We also have a bunch of new guides and resources we've done that have been created in a way that's intended to be more digestible for folks. And so, for instance, some of those are now uploaded to that web page. So really, go and check out what's there. Additionally, as you are hopefully aware, SBP has a mobile application that we originally developed in partnership with AT&T called the Equip app. And we're continuing to go through a lot of iteration and future improvement on that app. Kyle is a great partner in that work, but it is a good resource, and you can also point people there to find both our preparedness and recovery resources. So what I want to talk about a little bit is, what it means when we're trying to build success and reaching households and community members with preparedness information. And so there's sort of a tiered approach that we're taking as we continue to build out the preparedness program and look to, what success for us is. And so the first level is just reaching as many people as possible. And that really goes to that 12 million reach goal. And so again, one of the biggest ways we can do that is through our more digital platforms. But we're also trying to increase our ability to analyze, for instance, what resources are being most accessed, so that can help in turn better inform what information we should additionally make available to folks and what they're currently finding most of interest or most useful. Then the second tier, so a little bit, starting to build more towards behavioral change, et cetera, is doing trainings, whether in person or virtually, with different stakeholder groups to educate them on topics. And, thinking about that is you're going to be working with them across 30-minute to an hour and a half period. There's a lot more information you can get out there and start to work towards changing their perceptions of, what are the different types of actions they can take to be prepared, or what are the things they're not thinking about that they should be, for instance. And then the third tier is, longer term engagement with communities and partners to really work towards deploying full community level preparedness. And that's less an emphasis this year because, again, this is actually the first time we've had full-time staff dedicated solely to this program at SBP. So we're really working to build out a lot of the foundations for the first couple tiers. But this is the goal, is to long-term do more and more really engaged work that is enabling community level preparedness of communities where SBP is engaged, either through our ops sites or elsewhere. So I'm going to turn it over to Tessa to share, for example, one way that we're engaging with partners.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. So like Helen shared a couple of slides ago, one of the main buckets, one of the main pillars of the work that we do in preparedness is educating. And this can take shape in a lot of different ways. We'll get to trainings further on in the presentation, but resource distribution, guides and handouts, and different things like that we share with our partners so they can share throughout their networks and have this further reach. So one of the really cool ways that this ended up happening earlier this year is with the Louisiana Just Recovery Network. And so what's really interesting there is our starting point is they had actually worked with SHARE on a handful of other grants. And so they've already been a partner of SBP, but connecting them with Prepare, that's something new as of the past couple months. And so they had been connected to us because they were working on this, they were facilitating this event to distribute 500 preparedness kits throughout Louisiana. And so what's particularly interesting about this distribution event is that the Just Recovery Network is a network. So they are connective tissue, and they have various organizations that comprise their network. And so, when I was coordinating with the main woman that was leading this initiative, I was trying to get a sense of how are you going to distribute these? What is the systems that are in place? And well, there wasn't a one size fits all approach. So because it was a network, they had pulled in different partners and different folks within that network, like, for example, Inclusive Louisiana and Greater New Orleans Interfaith Climate Coalition. So a whole bunch of different folks were a part of this larger initiative to, they were to make preparedness kits, but we ended up helping by sending preparedness resources and handouts and materials to get stuffed in those kits. So it's just one way that this resource distribution in this greater bucket of education can form. But it was a really cool one that we had a chance to work with earlier this year. So one great example we wanted to highlight for everyone today.
Yeah, thanks, Tessa. And I think, again, there, what's really key is there's so many entry points to people working with SBP, and SHARE is a really critical partner that we work with in the Prepare program. But, continuing to build across programs, which we'll speak more to, there's just so many more ways that, if one program is engaging with X partner, there, other programs can come in as well. And so this is something we really hope to continue seeing being scaled at SBP. So So, there's a bunch of different ways that and offerings we do in the training space. And as I shared earlier, one of our goals this year is doing trainings and campaigns in at least 12 target communities across the US. These correlate, for example, with everywhere we have ops sites, but also areas like Kentucky, where we have fellows embedded, and then states where we're also trying to increase SBP's partnership and networks, so like North Carolina, for instance. But I'm now going to go through some of these training vehicles in the next slides that we're using and have had success with thus far with these different stakeholder groups. But one thing I just wanted to mention, and if any of you've ever seen JR do his Building a Culture of Preparedness presentation, this is really the goal again, is like we have to work across all levels of household and then community stakeholders. So the small businesses, then local NGOs, local government, and then of course there's state and federal. But if we can't achieve preparedness across all levels, it's really hard to do so at any one level. But preparedness also really begins with the individual, and so that is why household level preparedness is such a high emphasis in the Prepare program. So we're just showing really quickly here what our training curriculum and offerings are at SBP in the preparedness space. Most of these are offered specifically by the Prepare program, but as you'll see here, there's a couple that are, for example, offered by Advise or in partnership with Advise. Again, train the trainer approaches is a huge part of what SBP does. And that's what Tess and I have been finding with a lot of our outreach to potential partners, is that they themselves need to be trained first to better understand some of the issues, in financial preparedness for disasters, et cetera, before they're able to in turn either schedule training with us for households in their area or themselves be able to be better speaking to individual level preparedness. But we have, three main target areas of our different training decks and offerings for folks. Several new ones that have just been developed recently are a slide deck, for instance, on building disaster resilient communities. And what that really does is, starting in particular with the pre-disaster period, trying to help different stakeholders that are engaged in trainings understand what types of activities and layered approach you can take of different programs and initiatives in your area to really build more disaster resilience over time. And so that presentation, for instance, includes case studies, not only of different things that SBP does, but also interesting case studies from other orgs or communities across the US. Also want to share here. So again, SBP, we have a lot of goals around reach. And so specifically year to date, as of today, which is for yesterday, July 20th, SBPs, we've trained over 2,000 individuals in these different training modules, whether it's for individuals or small businesses or practitioners. We're really this year focused on better understanding the data and what types of trainings and create the best reach. And so the months that we've had the most campaigns and partnerships launched thus far have been April through June, which makes sense because that's when more folks are starting to think about preparedness and are thus more interested in doing trainings with us. But, you can see that it's kind of varied month to month, the number of trainings we're doing, and then also the reach achieved through those. So as we continue to collect data for the rest of this year, next year, et cetera, we'll start to see if there's sort of, a more typical average amount of people reach through trainings, and also continue to think through, what is the target we're trying to reach? What's the right balance of smaller trainings that are very hands-on versus trainings that reach a ton of people, but are less back and forth with whoever's participating. One thing we did in the household space this year was experiment with doing our own webinar series. So from April or March through June, we did once a month webinars for anyone who wanted to join about preparing for hurricanes and floods. We also did a 2-part series that broke it up into more detail on actions households should take. This is something we'll probably continue to do in future, but we're still figuring out, again, the right frequency of doing these. Then something we've really found to be successful in reaching a lot of folks is training individuals through their places of employment. And SBP as a whole has so many great corporate partners. And so we've been doing a number of trainings for them. Something that was really exciting is that back in early June, we did a training event with AT&T. And across as many trainings as possible we're trying to include post-presentation surveys to collect data to better understand, what folks learned and what information was most useful. And over 100 AT&T employees had answered the survey that we used with them, and we had really positive results. So, for example, 95% of the respondents said that they would take action based on the information that was shared in our preparedness presentation, and then 98% of respondents said that they learned something new. So those are obviously great stats, and the type of stats that we really want to continue to see. And then something else is, while SBP really focuses on domestic issues, obviously a lot of our partners are international companies and work all over. And so Dow Chemical, for instance, they've never done an international disaster preparedness program before. And so we partnered with them to do their first preparedness webinar for employees across the world, and that took place end of June. And it was really exciting. There were employees on from at least 9 different countries. But as we continue to think about content for trainings, we'll continue to adapt, how much is US focused versus trying to also be as relevant and helpful as possible for folks if they're in other locations. And then in this next bucket, and again, encourage folks to put questions in the chat if you have any. There's a lot of different ways we've been doing trainings for nonprofits and local governments. And one medium through which we reach folks, if it's not, a partnered webinar, is through expos and conferences and workshops. So for instance, myself and JR from the Advise team, we both presented in a symposium that Pew Charitable Trusts and some state partners in North Carolina put on in early April that was specifically focused on increasing flood resilience in the western part of North Carolina. So I, for instance, did a presentation on ways to increase flood insurance uptake in the region and understanding the importance of disaster insurance. In April, myself and Reese May, we also presented at ResCon in New Orleans about different financial mechanisms, including RAF, which you guys are probably familiar with, but also some insurance pilots that I've been working on again, ways to increase access. And then I wanted to turn it over to Tessa to share a few examples of things that she, for instance, has been doing in this realm.
Yeah, so for example, a few months ago, at the start of the year, we were able to make some really strong connections in North Carolina with the governor's office, and then with a handful of different long-term recovery groups, which are really active in the entire disaster spectrum. But I've been communicating with different folks about, wanting to increase disaster preparedness education and have more events throughout the community, and just, as many different types of preparedness initiatives as they could possibly bring into their communities. And so we had the chance to attend a series of 2 to 3, a couple hurricane expos. And it was so interesting how, these all took shape in very different ways. So for example, one was a tabling event. And so I had the chance to go to Craven County, which is far along the coast, very beautiful in North Carolina. And I got the chance to meet a lot of folks, and families came through, and, we had these 5-10 minute conversations on various different preparedness tips, that 5 quick tips that's in video form, talking through things like that are easily digestible for folks. So a tabling event was one way that these hurricane expos came to be. Another was and this I think is very unique. They held the expo at a Lowe's. And so this was aimed towards the general public. And we had some tabling in the front. And then they had set up right in the beginning, right in the entrance where there were a lot of lawn chairs and furniture and stuff. They had set it aside or set it in a circle, and they had different folks present. So I gave a presentation. We had a whole bunch of local folks, EMA give presentations. We had folks from NOAA come. And so it was a lot of information that was packed into this public setting, and folks either knew about it. There was a lot of marketing for the event, or they were just coming to Lowe's on a Saturday and happened to hear us talk and, wonder what this screen and what this presentation was about. And so that was a really unique thing that one of these long-term recovery groups did in order to spread the preparedness word. So there were a couple other ways that long-term recovery groups engaged in different types of hurricane expos. But on the conference front, I also had the opportunity to attend. There was with Angela from the SHARE program, and this was the National VOAD conference. And SBP is a national member of VOAD. And so it was really great to go and meet so many folks, and we had a table, so we were able to distribute information and make connections. And so, yeah, really great event that we had the chance to go to.
Yeah, and something to emphasize here is, one, there are these training opportunities specifically through these different venues, but then there's also what's hard to fully quantify, which is just the new connections made and increasing knowledge and awareness of SBP, so that local partners in different areas that might be attending these events are more likely to think about us and the different services that they learned we provide, et cetera, if unfortunately something occurs. And so, some of this is, for example, this Hurricane Expo that Tessa had done in Craven County, North Carolina, is part of this Blue Skies outreach that we're doing in some target states of just increasing our networks and awareness of the organization. So I wanted to share a few examples of things that we're doing in the business space as well. So, of course, we have our Houston office, which several of you guys are part of. But for example, the Greater Houston Partnership is like the mega chamber of commerce for the Houston region. And so I was part of a panel event back in early June that had business leaders and other stakeholders from across the region that we were discussing in this panel, different ways that business leaders can help build their organizational resilience for disaster events. And so again, great way to both educate folks in that area on some things that we really emphasize, like employee preparedness and extending what is thought of as part of business continuity. But again, this is the type of thing that is a great way for SBP to create more reach in an area. Something that's another interesting example that's actually more international again is, some of you might remember, Thomas went to Australia from the Build program to share SBP's experiences starting after Katrina and how we've grown as an org. And Prepare, we did 2 events with the stakeholders in that region as well, but remotely. And, they had recently gone through this really horrible flooding event a year ago and are thinking through in this new government agency called Northern River Reconstruction Corporation, how to best approach building regional level resilience. And so one of the things that we did with them through the Prepare program was doing an advisory session for one of their teams that's working to build a new program that will be like their Resilient Businesses Extension Services program. And so in that session and through prep worked on sharing like our insights to localized engagement and working with kind of the smaller chambers of commerce, ways to incentivize and help the smallest businesses that are most vulnerable. They have a lot of emphasis there on Aboriginal small businesses. And so there's crossovers again to some of the most vulnerable business communities and areas where we work in the US. But a really great exchange internationally in how we can, learn from one another, not only in the US, but also globally in different contexts and share, learned experience. Another example in this more business space is, for example, next week, we're doing a two-part series with the National Association of Manufacturers, who's a great partner of SBP. If you think about all these different major factories and companies in the US, a lot of them are located in areas where SBP works. So again, more rural communities and areas where manufacturing might be a major emphasis for the local economy. And those businesses have a huge outsized role in helping folks in the area, because so many people in a community might work specifically for that company. And so along with a private sector company called CBiz, we'll be doing a two-part series with NAM next week. Myself and Liz will be presenting and moderating across the two panels, but it's a great opportunity and hopefully it'll go well. And then one other thing in the space of working with businesses, a really exciting new type of collaboration we have is, for example, working with this one online banking company called Chime. We're just beginning our scope of work with them, but they are, for instance, a banking firm that focuses in particular on increasing access to financial services for folks that are typically left out of that sphere. So people that are less comfortable with, having their money in traditional banks, or may not have had credit cards before in the US. And they work in how they are a digital bank to really make everything financial services related feel more accessible for people. And so there's really nice alignment in working with them over the course of this next year, and hopefully we'll continue to build that partnership. But we have some specific things that we'll be doing with them. And so this is something that I think can be very much replicated with other businesses that SBP could work with. But we're, for example, given our expertise, going to be providing them with different types of messages that are digestible that they can be sending to clients pre and post disaster in the different areas of the US where they have larger number of customers. So not only preparedness information, but also the recovery information that SBP has that could help their clients. We'll also be doing some different types of blog posts on financial preparedness actions as they relate to disaster events. So making things in a very digestible format for their client base. And then doing trainings, of course. So one, we'll be doing trainings for their customers, similar to what we do with the folks we've done trainings with at Dow or with AT&T, but of note is they're really interested in us educating their employee base specifically on, how are low-income clients of theirs impacted by disaster events. So increase awareness in what their business strategy could even be, and better understanding these compounding challenges that clients of theirs face when there's a disaster event. So we're really looking forward to getting more into this work with them, and it's something that will be very replicable with other potential partners of SBP. Okay, again, please put questions in the chat if you have any, but we're going to highlight briefly a couple of specific initiatives in the program that we're working on, but again, want to have time to answer you guys' questions. So the first thing relates to embedding preparedness across SBP, and you've already heard us mention a bit ways that we've been engaging with the other programs, but I'm going to let Tessa share some different examples here.
Yeah, thanks. So, we spent the majority of the presentation so far talking about the importance of reaching homeowners and, our goals with expanding our networks and making partnerships and that sort of thing. But it is one of our main goals this year to expand folks in SBP, our education and our understanding of different topics and different components in the preparedness space. So one of the ways that we are doing that is with our build program. We're working with different ops sites to do two things. The first is tabling events. So just getting in the community. Most often what they're doing is joining these events that are already happening, and then have a whole bunch of other vendors involved. So there are many folks at the table to talk to and distribute information and spread the word. But we're also working with offsites with a variety of different types of training. So homeowner trainings, past and current clients of SBP, that's one of the routes that folks are taking. But then also partnering with different community organizations to help bring in folks more broadly and into the preparedness presentation. With the SHARE program earlier this year, we had done a 2-part webinar series that went into depth on insurance and embedding financial literacy, mitigation options for protecting households. And so it was a very breathed out 2-part series that happened at the mid-end of April, and they were back-to-back days. And so that was a very fun thing that we did right a couple months ago to partner with one of the other departments in SBP and get the information on preparedness out, spreading that out to folks. And then Blue Skies Outreach. We talked about this briefly before with that partnership with the Louisiana Just Recovery Network, how they had first partnered with SHARE on a handful, 4 or 5, many different grants over there. And so they are strong partners over in SHARE. And so it's important for us to be able to make these connections, and for SHARE, they recognized that there was a need. They were wanting to plug in different types of handouts and resources, and so it made sense to connect us and to plug us in. So those are some ways that we've been engaging so far. And then with the Advise program, I had just gotten back actually from Alabama 2 days ago. We're doing a lot of work with AARP in various different states, Alabama being one of them. We're going to New Mexico next. Helen and I did a presentation for Texas last week. And so we're working with Advise to provide technical assistance in disasters. And so a lot of these are looking like preparedness or readiness symposiums. But there is also one on in the rebuild space, recovery space. But we are seeing a lot of the folks over at AARP in those different states that we're working with are wanting to engage more deeply with preparedness. So we're having the opportunity to go and do different presentations on the different offerings that Helen had laid out before. So things like building resilient communities. We had done a mental health preparedness session, and then an offering on insurance as well. And then lastly, with Advise, we're working really closely with the Resilience Fellows on all the many ways that they are engaging with preparedness. So a lot of them are working on different types of trainings to different folks. So economic alliances and hospital systems, and working on continuing to expand upon a mental health presentation. And so there are different really creative ways that each of the fellows are getting involved in this type of work in a very unique manner. And so we're lucky to have that opportunity to work with them one-on-one as they get this word out to their communities on preparedness. Oh, and yes, definitely want to make sure I'm talking about this one. So this is in graph format, but just to show this training that we're doing right now with the AmeriCorps members. So we've had 3 different training sessions so far, and we have taken our main presentation that goes over 5 main topics for homeowners. And we have we've developed this a little bit further into a preparedness training course. And so in this course, we look at things like financial literacy and the 4 different funding mechanisms that could fund a family's recovery, and safeguarding important documents and mitigation options and tools to reduce risks. And so it's this really great comprehensive training that we have been able to offer to AmeriCorps members so far. I think I mentioned we had done 3 of these trainings. And after folks participate in the training session, which is about 45 minutes to an hour, then we follow up with a quiz. It's very short, about 10 questions that folks can retake as many times as they want. And then once they pass, and I say once they pass because everyone who has taken the quiz has passed so far, so that's exciting. Then they receive their certification and become officially SBP Disaster Preparedness Certified. So this is an initiative that is pretty new within the past 2.5 months. So we've had the opportunity to do it a handful of times, but I am hoping that, as we continue to work towards further developing this program, we're going to be able to offer this training session to SBP as a whole. So keep an eye on that, and hopefully we'll be able to offer that to everyone pretty soon.
Yeah, and just to highlight there again, preparedness begins at home. We want everyone at SBP to be better informed and prepared in their own personal lives. And so starting with our AmeriCorps members who are often, living on their own for the first time, et cetera, is a really important place to better equip them with the information they need for the stage of life they're in, but also thinking ahead to when they might be homeowners and various other things. But also stay tuned, as Tessa said, something that we're working on with HR right now is for National Preparedness Month, which is September, is having a program of activities that'll be offered to folks all across SBP that relate to preparedness and getting folks more engaged in this space. So it's something that really means a lot to us in the Prepare program, because when we can showcase, what's also successful with our own employees and colleagues at SBP, that helps us better do our job externally with all these other stakeholders we're working with. So we've still got some of you guys on here. And so our last two things we're going to go through relate more to what Tess and I've been referencing on increasing financial preparedness. And so bear with me for a second, because I come from a research background. When you look in the research space, all the literature really demonstrates, and we know this intrinsically through all of our work and the communities we serve at SBP, but low and moderate income communities suffer disproportionately and recover less quickly from disaster events. It's a really hard reality. But when we think about your ability to recover from an event, financial resilience, so your ability to recover from an economic shock, which a disaster event is, really underpins all other aspects of recovery. And without it, you're not going to be able to recover. And so, when we look at DAP and the ability to get money from aid and all these other mechanisms, it's just so important. And it's really critical that we build it into and how we're trying to prepare people for disaster events. So when we look at the household level for doing trainings, there's 5 key topic areas that we really go through in all of our different trainings. And it all begins first with better understanding what your risks are. But what you'll see here under 2 is that we educate people on how to make a recovery plan in advance. So your preparedness plan is more than, having your emergency kit and an evacuation or sheltering plan, which of course are so critically important, but that's not where preparedness stops. We really focus and emphasize all these different actions that you see listed here and building a larger, more complete preparedness picture for yourself. And really the financial aspect underlines all of that. With all stakeholders, it doesn't make sense to necessarily put it in those terms of being financial, but that is what it is. And I'd encourage you guys to attend some of our household level trainings for yourself, so you can be better equipped to talk and understand all these topics in more detail. But just in particular, as I was just mentioning, we really began disaster planning with this first step being planning how you'd recover. And so we go through in detail, how to better save, what you can and can't access loan-wise, depending on if there's a federal disaster declaration, the challenges of accessing federal aid and understanding the importance of appealing. And then in particular, really honing in on disaster insurance coverage and how to make it more affordable and accessible. Just again, to put this picture in front of you, according to FEMA's own data, the average disaster assistance grant is only about $5,000 versus the average flood insurance payout that would come from the National Flood Insurance Program is $69,000. So when you're thinking about, where we want people to be ultimately and what they're planning for pre-event, purchasing insurance is where we want to get more folks to. And so some of it's just the better understanding under how important it is and putting the money into the premium. With others, it's working with them to help them be able to get to the point of being able to pay that premium. So in our insurance curriculum, we cover a bunch of different things. Again, encourage you guys to attend future trainings and check out our resources. But this is really such a critical area of what disaster preparedness is. And then second, going off of that, something that we're working on is how to launch more inclusive insurance pilots. And what this refers to is policies and programs that are designed to meet the needs of underserved populations with appropriate and affordable insurance. So any type of insurance mechanism that is helping to enable more low-income populations to be able to access insurance. And, as you might have seen in the news, particularly recently, a lot of insurance carriers are starting to pull out of some of the states that are really at the forefront of climate change. So, California is having constant wildfires. Florida, the flood risk and frequency of hurricanes is quite severe. Same for Louisiana. And you've seen, rates have spiked in these areas in particular, and insurers are getting really nervous. And so they've been starting to pull out of the market because it no longer, as private sector companies, is smart business for them to be offering insurance coverage in those places unless they have more people buying insurance and then could therefore keep costs down. So something that just to think about is, you think about car insurance. Vast majority of people in the US purchase car insurance. And so you have a really diverse risk pool. So if there's an accident in a given area, that's not going to cost the insurance company great amount of money because they have so many other people that are not going to have disaster, not going to have a car accident in that year, that it really offsets the cost of that. Well, with disaster insurance, so thinking about flood insurance in particular, people are only buying it essentially if they're required to because they're in a federally mapped floodplain. And so that means the risk is super concentrated and therefore super expensive. And there's only so much insurers can do to kind of shift that risk into other markets of the insurance space. And so it's just a really big challenge on how to make disaster insurance coverage more affordable. That being said, there are some different ways we can work on it. So coming out of my previous work and Tessa's starting to get into this space, we work on advising different state and local leaders on policy changes and programs that can help them make insurance more affordable for their low-income households. So there's a number of different ways you can do this. There's a few different places that have been piloting new types of programs to either make national flood insurance policies more affordable or introducing alternative programs and policies that are private sector based but only give you partial coverage. And so one thing in particular that we've been a partner on is a pilot insurance product in New York City that uses an insurance-like mechanism to deploy very fast emergency cash grants to households. And the goal being there is to help stabilize the households and prevent this downward spiral post-event by giving them more capital right up front to address damage to their home, et cetera, that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do quickly. And therefore, the damage and mold and everything would get worse. So this is a little bit more on that project. It's something that I brought over from my old job at the Wharton School. It's funded through a National Science Foundation grant, but has been really interesting work that has required so many different types of partners working together to get to the point of even having this small pilot that we're doing. But there's a lot of discussion around replication, expansion, learning from these types of pilots for other places in the country that are wanting to, again, experiment with more ways to make insurance available. We went through a really intense process to narrow in on that specific pilot, but I'm not going to go into detail. But something coming off of it that's also exciting for Prepare, but also SBP as a whole, is kind of coming out of that project and a larger scope of work that I've done on looking at all these different ways and emerging opportunities that both the public sector and private sector are working to make insurance more accessible. There's a conference that we're going to be co-hosting with Environmental Defense Fund and American University in DC this September. And so it's a really great thought leadership opportunity for SBP to help convene all of the experts in the climate and insurance space to discuss all of these different types of emerging solutions and hopefully work towards there being more pilots to help our lowest income and most vulnerable communities. So it's something we're really excited about. And yeah, the focus is really honed in on, not being an academic conference, but being a place to showcase all of these great solutions that are coming to market, and try to have come out of it there being more things that'll be piloted. And there's really great representation from across the board, but we're very excited to have folks in particular from federal agencies that'll be presenting and speaking. So with that, we've got just a couple minutes left, but want to open it up. So please feel free to even just unmute yourself, whatever works best for you. Just put questions in the chat or unmute. And just want to say, we know we went through a lot, but you can also reach out to us over email, or if you want to chat, schedule a short time if you want to dive in deeper to anything we're working on. No questions?
Can I make a comment?
We'd love that.
I heard you guys mention Dow Chemical, and I at one point lived in Plaquemine, Louisiana, and I'm hoping that they took advantage of your preparedness training, because there was a big explosion over there a couple of days ago.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, we'll see. Actually, their main the main partner that we work with there, he comes from emergency management himself, and so I'm sure he's very busy dealing with what's going on. But they're interesting in that they really are going to be trying to scale up what they're doing across the company for employee level preparedness.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, so I think I do know that some sites that are located, particularly on the Gulf Coast, do their own individual level trainings more often. But sorry to hear that had occurred a few days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I thank you guys for the nice in-service training. I took a lot of notes, and one thing I know that in my household, they are not familiar with the word prepare.
Yeah.
So I've gotten a person from the community to come out, measure the windows, and so that I can purchase boards.
Yeah.
So once, well, I don't want to say once something happens, but at least I'm trying to be prepared.
Yeah. No, and it's what's so hard is, we all have so many things going on day to day in our lives that, stopping and setting aside the time to prepare for something that you hope is never going to happen, or that you hope is never going to happen again,
Yes.
is really, really hard to do. And so what we try to do in our trainings, particularly for households, is break it down into actionable steps because it's just getting started. So I think that's great. Again, starting somewhere like with fortifying your windows more. Again, it's so important, particularly on the mitigation side, to make
I
investment
agree.
in your home.
100% agree.
Well, thanks for joining. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? We've got a shy group here. Well, please feel free to reach out to me and Tessa over email. And again, we're always happy to talk. We're always happy to dive in deeper on particular things we're working on. But we're all in this together, and it really, for us, and so much of the work we're doing also with our operations sites this year is working to reach more people, building off of the relationships that all of our colleagues like you guys have already built, particularly in the recovery space. And so, long term, the goal is really for all of SBP's clients is to work towards their future preparedness. And obviously we're doing a lot of work with folks that SBP may not have engaged with before as well, but everything should come back to, we're trying to shrink the time between disasters and recovery. And so that means for folks that have unfortunately gone through something before, trying to build more time and capacity into, client services and different departments being able to help prepare those folks in particular for the next event. But yeah, thank you all for joining today, and please feel free to reach out anytime. With that, we'll see if we can end it here.
Thank you, guys. Helen, Tessa, thank you.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye.
You do the same.